You ever think the President of the United States would be celebrating your unemployment?
I mean, that son of a bitch, you know, is really unbelievable.
Mr. Son of a bitch.
I mean,
Mr. Son of a bitch.
His royal, yes, no, I never imagined that we'd ever have a president like this, and I hope we don't ever have another president like this again.
It was the kind of week where everything felt like it was breaking at once. Poll numbers sliding, public anger rising, a war narrative spinning out of control, and right in the middle of it all stood Donald Trump louder than ever, trying to insist that chaos was victory, panic was strength, and criticism was somehow proof of greatness. But this time, the pressure wasn't coming from one direction. It was coming from two of the biggest late-night voices in America. And together, Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert turned Trump's public image into something he could no longer fully control. Kimmel hit first, and he hit with ridicule. He took Trump's self-pity, his grievance-filled holiday messages, his collapsing approval numbers, and his increasingly bizarre attempts to sound strong and reduce them to what they looked like from the outside. Not leadership, not command, just a man demanding applause while the country stared back in disbelief. He leaned into timing, into tone, into letting the silence after a punchline do just as much work as the joke itself.
Colbert has no talent. I mean, I could take anybody here, I could go outside in the beautiful streets and pick up a couple of people that do just as well or better. They get higher ratings than he did. He's got no talent. Fallon has no talent. Kimmel has no talent. They're next. They're going to be going. I hear they're going to be going.
I hear they're going to be going. The president went on, I hear Jimmy Kimmel is next. Nope. No. Absolutely not, Kimmel. I am the martyr. Okay. Kimmel didn't need to scream. He just held up the contradiction and let the audience sit with it a second longer than usual, stretching the moment until it became uncomfortable in a revealing way. Trump wanted to sound like a powerful president guiding the nation through crisis.
I never even imagined there would ever be a situation in which the president of our country was celebrating hundreds of Americans losing their jobs. With somebody who took pleasure in that. That, to me, is the absolute opposite of what a leader of this country is supposed to be.
Kimmel made him sound like a man rage posting into the void and mistaking his own echo for loyalty, a figure trapped inside his own performance and unable to step outside it. Colbert came from the other side, colder and more surgical. He wasn't just mocking Trump's style, he was taking apart the structure around him piece by piece, the media pressure campaigns, the behind-the-scenes network fear, the obsession with silencing critics, the corporate deals that seemed to bend around political power, and the strange, ugly reality that comedians were suddenly sounding more direct than the institutions meant to challenge the presidency itself. He slowed everything down, repeated the language, and forced the audience to actually hear it instead of just reacting to it. Colbert gave it a name, said it plainly, and refused to dress it up or soften the edges. That was what made Trump furious. A joke can be shrugged off. A clean accusation delivered calmly and repeatedly is much harder to escape because it lingers and builds.
He posted his latest plans for the war in Iran. Tuesday will be power plant day and bridge day, all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the straight, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch.
The real problem for Trump was that neither host was playing his game. He knows how to fight noise. He knows how to answer outrage with more outrage, insults with stronger insults, chaos with even bigger chaos, turning every conflict into a louder spectacle until it overwhelms the original point. But Kimmel and Colbert did something more dangerous. They slowed him down. They made the audience sit with the words, the contradictions, the bizarre public claims, the giant boasts, the defensive eruptions, the endless need to turn every event into proof of his own brilliance. They didn't try to outshout him. They made the noise feel empty, stripped of its power. Were once examined closely. Once that happens, the spectacle starts shrinking. What once looked powerful begins to look fragile. What once looked dominant starts to resemble panic. That is exactly what was happening. Trump had gone quieter in traditional appearances, even while his online presence grew stranger, darker, and more erratic. He was making threats, issuing declarations, celebrating imaginary victories, and posting like a man trying to scare the world back into alignment. But the more he posted, the more it felt like evidence of instability rather than control, like a performance slipping out of rhythm and revealing the strain underneath.
Trump's deadline for Iran to, quote, open the effing strait or you'll be living in hell. He gave a hard cutoff time of right now. And then This morning he wrote, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again." 4 months ago.
Kimmel turned that instability into punchlines, each one landing not just as humor, but as a small reframing of how the audience saw the moment. Colbert turned it into a pattern, connecting the dots, showing that this wasn't random behavior but a system repeating itself over and over again. One made people laugh at the act, the other made them see how the act worked underneath. And that was where things really started to slip, because once the audience sees the pattern, the old tricks stop working the same way they used to. The dramatic all-cap statements, the fake confidence, the sudden pivots, the demands for loyalty, the claims that everything is under control, while every visible sign suggests the opposite. Kimmel made Trump sound ridiculous. Colbert made him sound dangerous. Together, they did the one thing Trump hates most. They made him understandable, and in doing so, they made him smaller in the eyes of the public. He reacted the only way he knows how. He lashed out at ratings. He raged about networks. He celebrated cancellations, demanded more, attacked talent, mocked relevance, and treated television hosts like enemies of the state rather than entertainers doing their job. But every reaction only deepened the humiliation. If these men didn't matter, why obsess over them? If the jokes didn't land, why try so hard to punish the joke tellers? If the criticism was weak, why did it produce such strong fury from the most powerful office in the country? That was the contradiction Kimmel and Colbert kept exposing again and again from slightly different angles until it became impossible to ignore. Trump wanted to present himself as untouchable, but he was clearly watching, clearly reacting, clearly wounded by mockery in a way real strong men never admit. The more he tried to frame them as desperate entertainers, the more desperate he himself began to look. And once the audience feels that shift, it is almost impossible to reverse, because perception, once cracked, rarely resets back to its original form. Colbert sharpened the deeper point. He suggested this was never just about television. It was about narrative control, about whether power could pressure media, reward obedience, and punish dissent while still calling itself a free society. About whether criticism would remain something protected or slowly become something expensive, something risky, something people think twice about before speaking. He wasn't just describing a moment, he was describing a direction, one that raised uncomfortable questions. Kimmel brought that same fear down to earth in his own way, turning it into one brutal observation after another. Simple questions that sounded like jokes but landed like challenges. If Trump's presidency was going so well, why did it constantly sound like he was fighting late-night hosts harder than he was solving national problems? Why did the energy always seem focused on image instead of outcome? Why did every criticism trigger a reaction that felt bigger than the criticism itself, as if the reaction revealed more than the original accusation? That question hung over everything, heavier each time it was repeated in different forms. By the end of it, the story wasn't really about one joke, one network, or one segment. It was about a president so consumed by image that comedians had become some of his most effective critics, simply because they were willing to replay the tape and ask the obvious question, what are we actually looking at here? And what people were looking at was not strength. It was a man spiraling under pressure, hiding from tough appearances, posting through crisis, demanding loyalty from everyone around him, and melting down because two hosts on two stages refused to let the performance pass as leadership. Kimmel made the panic funny. Colbert made it legible, and Trump, instead of overpowering them, confirmed their point with every angry response, reinforcing the very image he was trying to escape. That was the real collapse. Not just that he got mocked, not just that the audience laughed, but that the myth itself, the giant, booming, unstoppable image, began to feel smaller every time the cameras cut back to him. And once that happens, once the room starts seeing the insecurity underneath the spectacle, the shouting no longer sounds strong, it just sounds scared.